Hey, everybody, I'm Scott Weichel. You're listening to My Kind of Country. Thanks so much for joining us on a Monday night. My friend Curt Ryle is returning with us tonight to share some more great stories from some of the legends in country music that he's worked with. And I know you've enjoyed the other talks we've had. And he's going to talk about a big one tonight, one of my all-time favorites, the great Ray Price. Curt Ryle, pleasure to welcome you back to My Kind of Country, my friend. How are you tonight?
Scott, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me back on. And, what an interesting guy Ray Price was. He was one of the very first major artists that I worked with. Now, I worked with Fiddlin' Frenchie Berg. I don't know. You remember Fiddlin'
Oh, my
Frenchie
gosh.
Berg?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, there's some great stories. There's a lot of artists that I've worked with. My goodness, we could probably do this for years and still have a lot to talk about. But one of the funny things I liked about Ray was, Ray was kind of a quiet kind of guy. He didn't say a lot. He didn't joke around much. And but I remember the very first time that I went out on tour with him. We were on the bus, and he had his mother with him. Now Ray was probably in his 70s then, and his mom was, I guess, in her 90s. And Ray was scared of his mom, because if he smoked marijuana, she'd get on to him in front of everybody, and it'd embarrass him, True story. And so she was back in the stateroom, and he comes running up to the front of the bus and raises the hatch on the ceiling, and he lights him a joint, because Ray smoked a lot of marijuana. And I was standing there looking at him, and I was kind of smiling, and he said, "Look, it's not easy having your mom on the bus. He said, it's like having a damn narc on the bus." I said, well, and I'm thinking to myself, this is funny. This is a 70-year-old man who's afraid of his mom, getting on to him. And I said, well, Ray, I said, I'll keep a lookout for her. And he said, yeah, do that. He said, go back there, and he said, just stand there, and if she opens that door, he said, don't let her see what I'm doing. I said, all right. And so anyway, one day we were on the bus, and I come on there, and I was a pretty young guy. I was in my 20s, and I'm sitting there drinking a carton of milk and eating donuts, which is probably the worst thing in the world you can do. But Ray, the first thing he did, he's looking at me, and he goes, son, you ought not be drinking that milk. And I said, well, what's wrong with milk, Ray? And he said, well, that right there is bad for your heart. He said, it'll harden your arteries. And he said, you shouldn't be drinking it. It's just not good for you. And I said, well, yeah, but I said, you smoke marijuana. And I said, that's not good for you. And I said, besides, you can't get addicted to milk. And he said, now, wait a minute. He said, are you saying I'm addicted to marijuana? And I said, well, I don't know. I said, I mean, you smoke a lot of it. He goes, son, I've been smoking marijuana for 40 years, and I am not addicted to it. Just immediately, I started laughing. Because if you smoke it for 40 years, you got to be addicted to it, right? and I just started laughing, and Ray looked at me real funny, and I said, Ray, do you hear the joke in that? I said, you've been smoking 40 years, and you're telling me you're not addicted. He looked at me kind of funny, and he said, well, that's what Willie told me. He blamed it on Willie Nelson.
Oh, man.
Oh, I loved it. I loved working with him. He was, and when Ray walked on stage, of course, and I can say this about him because I love him, and everybody knew that Ray, he was like Willie. Those guys, they just smoked a lot of marijuana. And he'd walk on stage, Scott, after he would, just before he walked on stage, he would smoke a big joint of this stuff. And he'd walk on stage and he'd be so paranoid, and his eyes would look like glazed over. And I asked him on the left, I said, Ray, you're really paranoid when you walk on stage. Why do you want to smoke that before you walk out there? And he goes, I'm not paranoid. And I said, you just look like you're kind of in a daze. And he goes, well, it just relaxes me, But, he would walk out there, Scott, and how he did it, he would hold that microphone. Now, I've worked with every artist in the world, and those guys, they'll get right up in a microphone, in an SM-58, those old mics that everybody used, and they get right in that thing and sing, but he would hold it down at his waist. And it would absolutely fill his voice was so big and so powerful that holding that mic 3 or 4 feet from his mouth would fill up an auditorium, and it was the most beautiful thing. And I just want to tell you quickly, working with Ray, when we would get to a concert, he would hire the orchestra in that city, and the orchestra would come on stage with us, and they would have sheet music up there, and they would be reading. Most of them had probably never heard the songs, but they're reading. And so I'm already up here with a 15-piece band, and then there's an orchestra behind me. And I want to tell you something. I have never been moved by music like that before.
Yeah.
There was nothing like walking on stage with Ray Price and having a 75 to 100-piece band up there, and to have that orchestra. It would literally put chills on me to hear his voice. I mean, say what you want, but there was just not very many singers that could sing like Ray Price.
Wow.
That guy was incredible.
That's for sure.
And he did not spare any money when it came to doing a concert. He would bring in the orchestras, and oh my God, it's just like listening to the record. I mean, we do For the Good Times and all those great hits he had, and it was the biggest highlight of my career, I think, being on stage and hearing that. It was just fascinating.
I got to see him twice in concert, and I can echo what you're saying. I was absolutely blown away. And the second time I saw him was with my son. My son was 13 at the time, and we were in the second row, right dead in front of him, and it was just so mesmerizing that everything fell away around us during that whole show. I mean, my son was 13, and we got done, and we both kind of just sat there in silence. And it was almost like it was almost like a religious experience. It was that incredible to watch and listen to him, and how classy he was on that stage. Everybody dressed up in suits and ties, and I mean, I've just never seen anyone like you said, command a microphone better than Ray Price did.
Yep, he was absolutely the best. And the funny thing about Ray is, his health failed him in the end, but his voice never did. I mean, the guy, even in his 80s, and when he was really up to, he could still walk in front of a microphone and absolutely just tear your heart out. That was one of the more fun times of my life. And of course, it was always fun being on stage with Bern and hearing that voice. I mean, they called him the voice of country music, and hearing Bern Goslin's voice coming through those speakers up there on that stage. I mean, it was fascinating. But the thing with Ray was, Ray had that band was so good, and it was so perfect, and to have that orchestra, oh my goodness, it's just like sitting there in a recording studio recording.
Yeah.
It was that good.
What years did you work with him? Did you play guitar or bass, or what were you playing for him?
I played guitar with Ray, and this would have been in probably the early 80s.
Okay.
Well, I was working at the Longhorn Ballroom there in Dallas, and I would go out with Ray, like every time he'd go do a concert, I would take off and go do a show with him. He wasn't working a lot of dates, so it made it where I could take off and get a sub to come in for me and go out and work these shows with him. And it was just a blast doing it, because I had always been a big fan of him. And so, yeah, it was fun. And, I've got a real diverse career in music, Scott. I've worked with rock bands. A lot of people, they think I'm a country musician, but honestly, I've worked with just about every jazz band, blues band, rock band. I even worked with Dr. Hook, if you remember those guys. And so, one of these days we'll get into some of those stories too. But I have to admit, probably Ray Price was probably the greatest singer I ever worked with.
And Curt, you are certainly no slouch either, my friend. We love your music here at My Kind of Country, and not only the music that
I appreciate that, man.
Well, not only that, but the great artists that you're working with your record label and your recording studio, and we just always look forward to hearing that new music when it comes out. So thank you so much, not only for that great music, but for taking the time to share some great stories with me here on My Kind of Country.
Anytime, Scott. Anytime.
All right, here's some fabulous Ray Price music as we continue with My Kind of Country. Curt Ryle, thank you again.